أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وأصحابه الطيبين الطاهرين ومن تبعهم بالإحسان إلى يوم الدين. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. وكشدا كيجيمو أبوجي كمفو ميها الله. The boy fan nun cho mo ni drolo mo mo ba na lo fen ken a che mo ni nyele chiwo we sa mi mo ne dro mo efe word no na le mi de nje ani ni wete e hwe ma ke ha li bi ya jo hawo na wo wala fen ke ana sam fle le hin e ablada bi o de ya bi na kuleje wo wa ha wo ji pepe chele we ko na wo ba tu wo ni fe mo ne fen ke wo wu edin wo bala ni kule ke jo mo e dro mo e mo bo na mo shi keba wo mo hin nyelo gbala Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam ike shami bi fe ke sabi fe ke anu kwafo ni wale ka me ni na mo me gbomo choy wale din Islam e shele ni mene e ko ba she wo ye la ni o ke nye pe ye 96.1 ne ba cho ne ke igbe ne wo nganye ke Islam hejele ngamo ni assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh o ke ni mo hejole ni fe ke dro mo fe wo no ni mene o ke nye epe ye wo gbejano ne no anto fele ayi abu awo ni woni ta mo ni fe kenye efele mle e ha wo mene mo ba na ke obote nyun himi ni ke okwe mene ake 1st October ni ke wo kwe wo safa wo municipality ma mene ye sham e ba cho wo safa bo ni wo na wo ha le agbe ke won kan wo be won na agbe ne hu me ni yo ebu awo ke tun gbe sort ya no ke tun em twa ke shin o social media no ni di ranot group we ke wo libi e fen kenye oba da me fen kenya cha ke na nyo egbo ko yi me ne 1st October to mi ake yeli ke bon bibi ni wo ke ba fen sa ni wonye wo fon eko wo mi boni afi ni enye fe gbegbele mo ni ye ha wo ni wonye wo batasi ni wo ke anokwale gbe ne a banye gbe no gbeja no nye bo to eji anokwale gbe South Al-Had eji la Muslim community da project bi agbeja ni anpa wo radio ne no ame ha wo ni gbe na hu wo kano live on Ranot TV ikano ho Facebook live ikano no bo ko mobile phone no type Ranot TV oba na no live ikano ho no ba kwe wo gbeje no ni ikano ne ni oba da nye me fen king ashi afi ma kwele shika jino na ke fio ke libi fen king ke shika be no nyo bata bi ene no me fen me ni ko we Facebook emi me ni amena wo me ni nuwe yibo eni wo ke bo a shika bibi ya na ne 0243271902 0243271902 gbeni baba Abdurrahman ama lejimo ne bo a shika bibi ne fen ha okoje wa ajole ke nutu woni yetu e ka sha ko sane bi manyo sane ke me awi dodo me ife me dodo na anya na ke shika kwa ba wo kwa wala ten account ne mi mancho wo fele ajole ke nyeme koko me fen ke ni yo se wo e bi en nje monitor wo se kwa ke no fen no ya lo Facebook e ka no live lo teacher manyo ajo bu ko share me bi fen ke ni ake oke la Muslim community da project wo hin yelo Sheikh Imam Alhaji Abdurrashid ni anyete wo duatin wo na ka fe ye ni fe ye you na we Facebook no live before back game back e kanu clap ni drop we fe wo no le no ji wo la date ko to pon municipal interaction municipality fe ke imam pana municipal chief imam ajela ha la ni ake wala ake la eda eto municipality eto paramountcy do je aje kakalo yenyu ahie no Imam Mohammed Hafiz Osanoma Ibrahim ke Imam Alhaji Ibrahim set owusu Africanus ni yebua chairman ejime na me wa Sheikh Agbene advisory board be elders akwanshi sort e fen ke ni yo masaji se fen ke ame ho ame yu ame boa boni afi no ya ke chile mo afi la me fen ke anu na ode abi ke ablade abi wo be afi bi ni ke wo ke South Al-Had ke anokwale gbe e ka shi kote ingena le nyen na wo yin boni fe ye ni bu fa ye ni Sheikh le wo fe ye le wo ebu fa ye choma ke gbedele e ba fe butu ye wo shian wulu ne ni dromo efe wo no ni wo kenye ekpe me fe ke ni mbo wo tro won ka ma ke ame ya me bo ake la ne wole ake hogba ni ba ni wo ajina fo ye ni ajeje ame na me jo massage sana me na ake gbe na e ha me ni jigbe na hin lo ye wo asafu emi o ba pe ye o madam monk se madam monk se na je me no ji wo icho je me ji wo community masjid there e all em je ni o ba pe won ka yin ake wole ake nyu ogbo e gbogbo ke wo baba ya go me da be second week na ya go mi wo ochi iji ho ni ba na ochi second week Saturday keke inu ho gba wo fe mass meeting no ochi ni le o ba jo wo idan shi wo ochi ni ji ho ni ba ni ochi wo ochi ye ngeje pa sa ke ni se nyo no no wote o ba la go mu se sa gbe ye ni wo nyene wa saje won ke massage se fa akechi wo ba he ame wi baro se na me ka wa ke hanu chu mo fen mo ke no e hanu mo kwa do na ne ba president ya we la cemetery ni wo nyene wo cha wo no chu no ji wo ho ni ba ni ochi wo ba fi keke enu hogba ni ji hogba ni ba ni ochi wo ba fi wo mass meeting wo feel clarity wo hanye feke man chu feel ajo wo feke wo bi afi bi ni mene wo kan ohoho wo je no ma ka ka na me shi mo no bo mi to a radio no ba na mi shi court Facebook nkan ohoho la dade ko to bon municipal chief ma Sheikh Imam Alhaji Abdurrashid ni anye to do atin e sham Sheikh assalamu alaikum
wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh
Sheikh te mo fen wo yo ten mene le gbo jama ne ke e ko wa je wa ke mene wo fe ko fi ka ma ni wo jama te mo fen mo ke shan bi mo fen mo muslim umma fen community fen
Allahu droma na mo fen mo praye jogba aka de san le wo shin le mi egbo ke gbe na na wo ke na gba bibi pe wo shin le mi ko ye shika gbe fan e ko egbo mo chu iwa le na mo ke onichumo lo e ko eta flat ogblan shin le mi san le ko shin Allahu droma na no fen no kan egbe ye be ni same mo ba ni bi fen aja ha
yes lela mo de joba bote o se ngulu emi mene ota o se ngulu emi dienche ni safa mene safa enye na eja me nche no makoko me gbo nche no makoko ana me buga je nyoshije dani amecho na ka normalo daje mo fi o
shida ke je ma ha Allahu adebo fa anu ncho do lo ke mobo na lo manche ko jo mo gbile no le pe ji mo no ja le no pe eno obi oyili ke bo amo fa ke jo mbi la ke kan ne click jo mo edro mo ke mo na mo shin ke bagbalo Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam no ke me feni wale na she Islam ni mene bi ne Islam ba sho mo bi obi la ke hin woto fan ye ewo obo je hin wo ye mu ye e ha wo shi fi mo je ke ji ba che wo ho e che obi mi ncho pepa e se hin agbene Islam ke jele ngam ja assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh no jinga mo ninke nga to ibule fen ke me ninke gbejano to ne no ye Facebook ke YouTube fam efia ke ye Ghana maneme based on noni akewo ke bi poten ni nyonchele hiye jikwe mene nyon na chola ke safare inagbi nyuman inyo ke 23 days je kalanda na afi ke function afi akpe enyo lo afi baba one ho na ke o mene gbine ko botemi ona ne kan gbilo ne kan shin nyonchele epoje ke kane mo ka konta bu ke ha wonyu moja mo gbeja no to wo na le no wo kane ko ko be mi ni ejikwe Ghana maneme be nyon na chola ke safare mene inagbi nyuman enyo ke eten
odi abi ga brada abi me one be agbene wonu keje wo nu mo de nchedi ebu nyohi akunta e hawo beni wo kele pe ko no ya wala ke enu chumo fa ike wo bote no komi ni ake Sharia intelligence ni na kan gbile ke okwe yo mo agugu yi komi ni gbajipo e mene ba ture ko manu ke e hawo usulu lufiki ke wolibie ntu ma che echichi yenda no mene o ba bote no ni ji Sharia intelligence me ni ake obote me na aka Sharia intelligence Sharia yin intelligence hu hin ka o ba cha no ye ni gbede ka o wa shi brofo ba ke we ni be fi osu enu enyo lo to ko anya hin dan e ka gbene o me ni pa ko ni wo gbo to ye cho nye me no cho nya no cho la ka shi ko e ka no ho ye Rano TV ye Facebook ye no agbene nwe 96.1 Gamen a radio station Gamen a shia wulu emi e ka jen kelefo jan onu Sharia intelligence Sheikh bismillah
yo wabacha ogbejano to eno ake ne kan icho na ede nche nibi no wa aka se yemi ifahe wo just matching nibi ekomelo enyokome ni wakase bi enyi se uchi enyota moni na hegbe ni ibabu wotu ye ko ekeji iti Facebook lo YouTube enyi se uchi enyo no ye je na mene no ye je ba na hegbe lo ko ekeji etwawo kwa de nche non wotu hegbejano non wotu hegbejano ni so chi enyo wo ke audio ba majile dane ina ho ene ba anya ni eshen shinke ake Sharia ejigbe ni ekukufu eji mla nyongo gbejiano to ni ekehwe shike ha adesan ni wonye no ye wokele nyongo wo shnamote wo ke adesan kokume hu ashnamote agbene ne kemla na hu no echon wo ni bi ni nyombo egbegbe ake wo ba anye ni wo fi ke ni bi ni nyombo egu ake wo hiwo keje na kan ni emi shin wo ke yi nto poten wo ke buti one kan echu na emenji bona fi ni keji taflache o ye hikupu ni nile loko beje me ni ba anye jajibo ekudobo ye ni bi ko mani keji iba boden cho ba le gbejiano no ba to no ba kwe Qur'an ni o ba kwe sunna ni ke ibeje ne nili no ke ba to no ba na ke ene bi ko ne ko ba boni afile ne ke no ba fi jaje mo ha bo ke fata he keji tafla cha ke nili loko mena ke mene sheik ji o mufti ji o le wi no ko ni no na ewie eja tafla che ke obo ne ken ka se mo na eto oduba wa le ato no ni sheik na ewie eja ni no ni sheik na ewie eja ke ton ne ken ka se mo na no oba na kan higbe ni se ochi enyo ko ni ka se mo ba wa he ko ni wo ke mene ke nyum ofe wo dro mo ni wo pe wo ba kwe noko wie moko ni Imam Ghazali ewie ni noko non wo chola ke ijtihad ke agbene nyumbo pojiemu ni ijile ku hawo edake wo ko ni kasimo ba wahi ko ni so chi nyo wo ke be mi ni Muaz bin Jabal radiyallahu anhu bala Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam etun le ni fele governor fele no kwelo ku kenya manko no bila ke Muaz bin Jabal kaji oti ni na agbakoba te oba fi ten ni o mo na kan na agba na ke makwa nyumbo wolu emi ni ji Qur'an emi ni bala bila ke ni ko kwe Qur'an emi ni ona ye jeme ke makwe bala Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam o ke mo ko ni fi mo e bila ke kaji okwe ne humi ni ona ye je mi no ba fi ke agbene matashin ni mabon himodin ni nke dwemmo ke ni le ba to he ni manna boni mamu na kan na agba na ma ha ni bala Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam ke obo modin ene jino ni wo chola ke ijtihad ji na agba ko neiba wie mo ko neiba ni na kan ni ke obe Qur'an okwe Qur'an ni ona wie mo ye jeme ake bona wie le ne ke oba sunna mi hu ona ke boni bala Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam imo na kan wie mo na ha ne shi agbene bono ke dwemo ke ni le ba to he ni shidamu ni oba na ibaja ye mla me no jino ni achola ke ijtihad me kuma biya ke ani ke ijtihad boni iyole ne mini we ba shengle kuno ni ba balake isake taflache inke dwemo ke ni le ato no he eneno ejeni imam kana na achola ke Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali rahimahullah wo fo le kuku ake Imam Ghazali ha wo no kwa woni nko ni ike ona ke nyumbo kujiemo ejeme kujiemo ji Qur'an ni wona ejeme ke agbene wiemo ni gbalo Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam nyumbo ke hale ni ike bajaje wo ni ke keji mboku ba aka ke o mi madamu inile ni yo peno ni kujiemo ni nyumbo ke ha nke no tuni yenshin le mi ike ne ke gbomone itamomoko ni taflache idamodumi ne damodumi egbe himbe mi shi ake do domodumi hewo ona noko ko ke oke odwemmo ke ni le pe ba atuni ni okwe ojiemo ni nyumo ke ha ni oke ba to he itamomoko ni damodumi ni egbe himbe mi ina noko ne ke na kan no mo ni ba aka ake eke nyumbo ojiemo pe ba atuni ni agbene eke dwemmo ke nile ebu akonta ni ikeba fata he ne ke gbomone le hu itamomoko ni idamokanemi ni enge himbe ake na enge himbe ni idamokanemi hiwo ina noko ne ke wie mo na ni Imam Ghazali wie ne ene twon wa ake isake wokwe nyumbo pojiemo no nyumbo ewie Qur'an ewie sunna me agbene ke wona ya mi ni woke dwemmo ke nile ba to he ke itamomoko ni inani fa ye fami boni Imam Ghazali ewi hane agbena boko ba bia ke mini ji se namo ni yo he ake dwemmo ke nile ba bu akonta ye ni bi ko mai mahabo no ko moni ba afi mo enyokolo eten ko ni ifi ni kasemo ha wo ke wocha no eja ke ni kasemo fa wa benche klen no ke wo ke wo dwemmo ke nile ba bu akonta ni wo ke tonyumbo pojiemo he ha ni wolio ake wie mo na ke ene enyumbo wie lo igbalo wie ani na kan wie mo anokwale ni lo ni keji anokwale ni te eshishi chomo ojoba eja ke ni so chile nke esro to ye no ni nyumbo ke no ni nyumbo nchon shishi eja ke manyama wie mo ko tafla cho no pa ke moni bu ebe ele nu shishi ke mbu abeko ni je wie mo ko ni tafla che awie kagye himegyia me a ho da ne ba hye wo no hye mfo wiemu afoa monile wiemu ojuba ba na ke oh no na atwon wone look at chi ben kaka Abdurrashid instead no bata radio no okay abc wiemu no wie te hihye keke mo etwon bojuba ewo mokuba ke o ne be ye Quran na me be ye hadith me lo it is not enough no ba ka ke ye Quran na me ye hadith me shino ni nyumbo ke te hihitwon mo ya sole no ni nyumbo ke ni sole body me Abdurrashid ntwon hihye a ni sole body bo hu otwon hihye ha ewo ke twon ne ke sound reasoning dwemmo ke nile na ke toni ahe iba ha minke bofen wo ba le ake ne ke wie mo ne na ke nyumbo ke lo igbalo ke ani ewie na kan lo no ni ji enyo miniba ni ewie na kan ni wie mo ho ni ewie te ehihitwon mo odoba ine ba ha wonu ine hihyi odoba agbene no na chola ke adila niji adilala implications lo the meaning of noni nyomboke ke twodwemmo ke nile na ke mbua konta no iha wonu hihyi odoba agbene nile poten niyo na kan niese niji hikma nile poten niyo na kan niese ke agbene makasid jinto lofo ke purpose niyo na kan wiemo lo na kan famo mi ewawo ni wonu hihyi odoba ni agbene na agbe no kra ke woke dwemmo ke nile ne nto nyongbo pojiemo hie eha wole yake o boni imaneke wiemo na ehye eha na kanji boni chofie etwon loje na kanji boni etwon wiemo eha ni ene wawo yegbei babao ano. Just by way of recapping a few of the things that we said last 2 weeks, and if you didn't have the opportunity of following us 2 weeks ago, you can go to YouTube and then Facebook. Just type in Rano TV and you can see last 2 weeks episode. You can as well follow today's presentation. Of course, we can also send the audio to you if you want it, so that it serves as a basis for you to understand what we want to look at today. But we got to a point where we're talking about what is known as technically as ijtihad, and we said that is the intellectual effort that is made to deduce or to draw conclusions that are not expressly stated in the Quran or the Sunnah. And we gave a basis for ijtihad. We said when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sending Muaz bin Jabal as a governor, he asked him, if you are confronted with a situation, what are you going to do? He said, I'll look into the book of Allah to see what Allah said regarding that, and then I'll draw a conclusion. And the Prophet said, very well. But what if the situation you were confronted with is not captured, encapsulated in the Quran? What will you do? He said, then I'll refer to your Sunnah, how you addressed it. The Prophet said, very well. What if it is also not captured in the Sunnah? What are you going to do? Then Muaz bin Jabal said, then I am going to make an intellectual effort based on the Quran and based on your Sunnah to arrive at a decision that will be in compliance, that will be in conformity with the Quran and the Sunnah. Then the Prophet said, very well, that is good. So that is the basis of ijtihad. And you realize that for most of the things that are coming up in contemporary times, they may not have been expressed in the Quran explicitly or in the Sunnah, but they are basis for us to draw conclusion and make decisions that will be in compliance with the Quran and the Sunnah. And that is what we are talking about as ijtihad. So I looked at a scenario that was created by Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali rahimahullah May Allah be pleased with him.
Amen.
He said, to insist on using your intellect without combining it with the revelation of Allah. You only want to rely on your intelligence, but you don't want to apply the revelation of Allah. Then Imam Ghazali said he would liken that situation to someone who is in the dark and has opened his eyes wide. Because you are in the dark and you have opened your eyes, you cannot see anything. And he said, similarly, if somewhere one was also to be in the light, but the person has closed the eye, the person will not see anything. And that is like only insisting on the revelation of Allah, which is the light, but not applying your intelligence, marrying it with your intelligence, the academic, the intellectual effort that you have to make to draw a conclusion. Imam Ghazali said, if you want to rely on your intelligence alone without combining it with the revelation of Allah, you are like someone who is in the dark, but the person has opened his eyes wide. You can't see anything. And if you are to insist on the revelation without marrying it with your intelligence, the intellectual effort coming hand in hand with the revelation, then it is as if you are in the light and you have closed your eyes. You can't see anything. That should tell us the importance, the role of sound reasoning when issues about Islamic jurisprudence come up. So I said, what is the role of sound reasoning when it comes to issues of Islamic jurisprudence? I said the first one is that it helps us in the verification of the historical authenticity and reliability of information or revelation. If, for instance, you ask me, Abdul Rashid, why are you doing ABC? I said, I'm doing ABC because the Quran says so. I'm doing ABC because there's a tradition, a hadith that says so. Now, how do we verify what I quoted out to you as a tradition of the Prophet? It is through sound reasoning that you can be able to deduce and even authenticate the veracity, establish the veracity or otherwise of what I am saying and attributing to Allah. Again, remember that last week, 2 weeks ago, I said there is a difference between what Allah said and what Allah meant. Because what Allah said may be explicit, in black and white, in the Quran. I can refer to it, you can refer to it. But exactly what did Allah mean? What is the implication of what Allah said? I may interpret it separately. You may interpret it differently. It is through sound reasoning that will be able to deduce that it is your interpretation which is apt, or it is my interpretation which is apt. So sound reasoning helps us in the verification of the historical authenticity and reliability of the information. For instance, what is the source of this information? Is it really from Allah or his prophet? We need to verify all those things. It is through sound reasoning that we are able to deduce that. Again, it helps us to understand the meaning and implications of the language of the revelation. By sound reasoning, we are able to establish the meaning and implication of what Allah said. So, what is expected of us to draw conclusions when issues of such text come up for discussion? It is through sound reasoning that we will be able to do that. Again, the third significance of sound reasoning as far as Islamic jurisprudence is concerned is the fact that it helps us in the appreciation of the wisdom, that is the hikmah, and the purpose, the maqasid of the revelation. What is the reasoning? What is the wisdom behind this revelation? And what is also the purpose for which Allah made such a revelation? It is through sound reasoning that you are able to establish all those things. It also helps us to be thoughtful and in the correct application of that specific text. So these are some of the importance of sound reasoning as far as Islamic jurisprudence is concerned. Now let us look at the evolution of usulul fiqh. We have explained what usulul fiqh means last week. 2 weeks ago. For us to look at usulul fiqh, there is the need for us to at least divide these evolution processes into three. The first stage is the generation of listeners. That is the time of the prophet. At the time of the prophet, he was there with his companions. The revelations came to him from Allah. He recited to them, this is what Allah said. So if they had an issue, they just refer to what Allah said. Or if it is not captured in the Quran, they approached the Prophet ﷺ and asked him ABC, and he explained to them. So that was the first generation, the first evolution stage. That is known as the generation of listeners. That is when the Prophet himself was there and his companions was there. Then the second stage of the evolution of usulul fiqh is what is known as the generation of gatherers. Here you are talking about after the demise of the Prophet ﷺ, his companions were there. Then there were other people who did not see the Prophet, but they saw the companions of the Prophet, collectively known as the Tabi'in. They were also there. So they were gathering from the companions. Okay, so they will recite to them what Allah said in the Quran. They were learning the Quran from them. The companions will tell them, this is how Rasulullah ﷺ addressed such and such issue. So they were gathering the information. This is the second stage of the evolution of usul fiqh. So they were the generation of gatherers. They were putting everything together. Then after them, we got to the third stage, which is the generation of fiqh and usul fiqh. This was when it got to a point when issues came up. You have the companions, some of them have died. Some of the tabi'in were there. And then the tabi'in, they were also there. Those who also saw the successors of the prophet, they were also there. So issues came up. And it was necessary to draw conclusion and take decisions. So it was at this stage that the usulul fiqh began to take shape. And we are told that, yes, it was during the time of Imam Shafi, rahimahullah, when officially issues about usul were gathered and written in a form for us. Remember, Imam Shafi was born in the year Imam Abu Hanifa died. So scholars said, yes, this is the year when an Imam died and an Imam was born. We start with Imam Nu'man bin Thabit Abu Hanifa, who is the first Imam. Let me also say, this is just for purposes of academic relevance, that if you want to look at the mazahib, the schools of thought, you can gather as many as about 14. But the popular ones are these four that I will state. Of course, the Shari'ah one is also there. But the popular ones are the one that was started by Imam Nu'man bin Thabit Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah. And let me also say, if we say, for instance, Mazhab Abu Hanifa, it doesn't mean everything within the Mazhab was a decision that was taken by Imam Abu Hanifa. What it means is that scholars who have identified themselves as Hanafis, they came together to agree on certain principles. So if we say this belongs to the mazhab of Abu Hanifa, it does not necessarily mean it was Imam Abu Hanifa who said ABC, but scholars who belong to his school, they came together to agree on those decisions. So you have the first Imam as Imam Nu'man bin Thabit Abu Hanifa. Then you have Imam Malik bin Anas. Then from him you also have Imam Muhammad bin Idris Shafi. That is the third Imam. And of course, it was true during the time of Imam Shafi that all these issues about usul fiqh were for the first time documented, written. And then after him, You also have Imam Ahmed bin Hanbal. May Allah be pleased with all of them. So these are the 4 famous schools of thought, but they are not the only schools of thought. These are the famous or the popular ones amongst the 14 that could be identified. As our discussions go on, we may come up with some of those issues, and I'll tell you, as far as this issue is concerned, this mazhab, they agree with this mazhab, they don't accept this. As we go along, that is when we come to the secondary sources of law in Islam, then I'll tell you, this mazhab, they accept this mazhab, they do not accept this. But these are the 4 most popular amongst the mazahibs. So manyame, noni wakecha noji usul fik hen ingle no washe amlone tefiten asheje no nke dani wo ba asheje me wo ba ja keje bemeni balo Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam ba henshin ke ba shi ingle no hen washe ne wo ba ja ni kase mom usul fik ke ba o ba fi gbe iten no klen no meni ke balo Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam henshin ni ame bo no ni gbalo wie tu ewo gbalo Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam eke ese enye lo ni ja sabe na kan bia me eko ame nyombo ke eneke ni ji ekani o Quran ha ni ame kasio kejo enu ke na agbakoba na mentawo boni sanamo na gbalo ko amake nye fiale neke ewo noji klen jino ni wotola ake the generation of listeners menimbo pojiemo ni gbalo ngo amembotui ke gbalo ni fi mu amenkweno keke we the second generation gbalo egbose agbene kaselo ni ke ba hinshin me kroko me hu bani ame na gbalo Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam egbo mu dana afọ ame shi ame banina ese enye lo acho ne ke gbeme na ke tabiin ame hu ambanye gbalo kaselo ase ni ame hu ame ba ko gbalo ke wo neke ni twa amen kase Quran ke jame agben gbalo efi eneneke amen bua gbalo esunna ewie mo ke enifi mo na wo cho na kan yi no ake generation of gatherers dani we the third stage yi no niji eten de mi ni eheheko na agbene esake anye atwa ake o ene ebo ni sana afile ne ene je ebo ni sana afile ne agben meneke wa fi nike meneke afi nike shi Imam Shafi rahimahullah leji klen ni lelo ni ebatashin ni bi na efe ebuana ni eha anmalewolo ni abanye na arefe ni akweno ni akefi nuko na kan yi no ji bi ni oba aka ake be aji usulul fikiye shishin ojuba ejake akedumoshin yewolohin shidani Imam Shafi baba nke mazahib ni kase mo he aye ekume ba afi nyuma ke edwe shi emi edweji no ni eheshi odogba ni aliame odogba edwe na ni eheshi odogba ji klen no ni Imam Numan bin Thabit Abu Hanifa rahimahullah no ni ibaje shishin ni achola ake mazhab Abu Hanifa ni nke kake mazhab ake school ne no etu ake no fe no ni ojeme Imam Abu Hanifa leji mo ni ba wi lo leji mo ni ba fi shini kase loy keni leloy ni nye Imam Abu Hanifa se keji amema noko na shin ebaton part of nakan mazabe nakan no be mini Imam Abu Hanifa lehu egbo se wobana Imam Malik bin Anas kote jile mi hefen hike mazab ni amenye se from West Africa ne wobana ke wo ke Imam Malik bin Anas le mazabe ji noni titri ni woke twoni ebe kote Egypt obana ke sole kote Saudi Arabia and the Gulf state obana ke amen sole mazab ni aketwoni oba Malaysia gbeke he kokume obana ke wo ekofen ko ke noni aketwoni shi many ni popular one say ye no make edwe na eme ama meta nchon ye Imam Malik bin Anas obana Imam Muhammad bin Idris Shafi leji moni ibiami ebua ni bi na efen na ni ike amma ni abafile wolo ni lehu ise wobana Imam Ahmed bin Hanbal lehu imazabe iyejeme ni bi ko me ke woba the secondary sources of law ye Islam wobana ke ine imam ne ike ne twoni imam ne iko ini shike bale the primary source which is the Quran ke non wo chola ke hadith mutawatir o bana ke ne ke mazhabs ne fe amemo me wo ke wo sheje boy kani if you no ku who you to me ke wo sheje wo ba abotim agbene ka ke mla ye islami mla ne ayegbe short ya no ni abua na mla lo kojo mo efen ni ba ye sharia ni wo ba anye wo jami ke wo ku enyome klenklen no achola ke al hukmu taklif no chon mlai ni neke mlai ne echon ni bi ni nyumbo enmegbe ke ni bi ni nyumbo echi ntwa ake egu wa ake woke wohi aka womi ene meji no na achola ake al hukmu taklif ni ye no se we no na achola ake al hukmul wadi eji ni bi ni kenakan ni bi ba dane agbene mlai ni nyombo ewowo na kan mla abanye ni aketuni ojuba to my example ka ke o solimo shie no mo bikobe be mla aji solimo shie no mo bikobe alode na kan no ji mla shi etemono te hila chamohi na ha bo chofa ka ke chofa na collection ne bo nyo ya kole lebi lo ba kole gbeke jana kan bi na ke ko chofa ishe ewo ni bi ni keji iba mla ne obanye ni oketuni no du no na achola ke al hukmul wadi agbene ye enemi fin ase nibi ni afio niji mlai ye islami ne kem mlai ne ni le loye babawe amebua nibi ne fin na kewu kui enumomi ja imam Abu Hanifa je peke oshejeme obana ke ibafi 7 iwo makton noni is generally accepted niji 5 fe hu ye Abu Hanifa je si Abu Hanifa ike enyo fatahe enyo ne ke fatahe ke noni damo ne ke nakan enyo fatahe wo baakwe. It's important to state that one of the major objectives of Islamic teachings is to guide people towards what is good and to protect them from what is bad or what will harm them. It is also important to state that Sharia rulings are grouped into two major categories. The first one is what is known as the al-hukmu taklifi, and these are those that deal with what is permitted or prohibited for a responsible Muslim adult known as mukallif, and they are referred to as the defining law. So, for instance, you are told do not take an alcoholic beverage or an intoxicant. It's a rule. It tells you you shouldn't do this. It also tells you what you should do. So those ones are there. And then the second category is what is known as the al-hukmul wadi. And it talks about those that deal with the factors and circumstances that make the permitted and prohibited correct and appropriate for their purpose, and it is referred to as the declaratory law. What this means in short is that if, for instance, you are told you should pray 5 times daily, the arrival of the time for the saying of the prayer must first be there before you can go ahead and pray. If the time is not due, how do you go and pray? I will explain all these things later. But it's also important to look at the classification of value judgment or Sharia rulings. And let me state that for purposes of this presentation, the value judgments are 5. Whatever is done in Islam, we'll look at these 5 things. Whatever is done in Islam, we look at these 5 things. But if you veer into the mazhab of Imam Abu Hanifa, there are 2 extra value judgments. But those ones only give you a little distinction from what is generally accepted. But all the 5 in the main school of thought are also captured in the Abu Hanifa school of thought, except that he adds some two other classifications, and we'll look at them. So the first one is that the first value judgment in Islam is that something that is being done or pursued is fard or wajib. If you say something is fard or wajib, it means it is compulsory, it is obligatory, and it is sinful if it is omitted. If we say this is fard or wajib, it means that thing is obligatory, it is compulsory. If you leave it out, you have committed a sin. So this category is the opposite of what is known as haram, which is sinful if committed. And some of these are individual obligations. Maybe later on we'll look at that. So some of the examples that fall under fard or wajib are, for instance, the 5 daily prayers, the payment of zakat for those who have the means. All these things are fard. The second value judgment is what is known as mustahab or mandub or sunnah, as some people will put it. So that is recommended, it is encouraged, it is liked, it is praiseworthy, it is rewarded if performed, but you are not punished if you omit it. And it is the opposite of what is known as makruh. So examples of mustahab or mandub or sunnah include the supererogatory prayers that we perform, the nawafil. It also includes the fasting outside the month of Ramadan that we observe. It includes tree planting, other charitable acts other than zakat and all those things. So this is the second value judgment. It means that thing is mustahab, it is mandub, or it is sunnah. Then the third one, for purposes of time, maybe we'll end on the third one. So inshallah, next week we'll look at the other two, and then we'll look at the other two Imam Shafi also adds to his, Imam Abu Hanifa rather adds to his classification. So the third one is what is known as mubah or jaiz. If you say something is mubah or jaiz, it means it is permissible, it is neither encouraged nor discouraged. You are not asked to do it, and you are not asked not to do it. And it is the largest of Islamic rulings because of the legal premise and assumption underpinning any issue in Islam is that of permissibility. You see, in fiqh, there is this mazim you have to learn. And I'm sure, inshallah, next week or next 2 weeks, we'll look at 5 major mazims that you and I will need to master. The first of these mazims is what is known as al-asli fil ashiya al-ibah, which means the original premise of things is that of permissibility. It means for someone to do anything or to say something, first it is assumed that it is permissible unless where there is explicit injunction saying you cannot do this. So this is where we end our presentation. So manyame hen wo ko ni kase mo ba wan meneji ni bi fin ni afie islami aboa ye gbe enumo no gbe enumo klen no ji no na chola ke fard lo wajib ka ke ene fard lo wajib ntu ake na kan ni otini ni isaka ofi keji ofi abangma isha ahabo ekoji isaka osolishi mo bikome wo zakat ka we ni namo no ni ji enyoji no na chola ake mustahab lo mandub lo sunna ka ke mustahab no ko ni awo he kan ake wo fi ile babao ni asumu ake wo ba fi anma jo mo ha wo ke wo fi shi anma isha aha wo ke wo shi na kan ni acho na kan ni ake mustahab lo mandub lo sunna to na wa fi no fi o to mo juke so ma hile no fi o na fi no me fe e bie ne ke no ni jieten he no ko ni kase mo ba wa ko ni meno chi keji nyumo asmo we wala mi wo cha wo ni kase mo no ji no na acho la ke muba lo jaiz ka ke ene muba lo jaiz eni twa ke afa ko bo ake ofi ni aboku bokoko ho ake ka afi ni twa ke ene hu angme bogbe o ba anyo fe ko fe tomo ko beke yabo no fe hu to egbala mo ko beke habo acho na ke mo ba lo jais ko ba isra wa na ke mlae baba o na ke tun ni lo ni bi baba o na fi ofin ba anda mo ba lo jais eja ke aye wie mo ko na aka ke al asli fil ashial iba ni bi fin angmegbe na fi ja noni agu ake ine akafi keji nyumba asmo menochi nuwe wala mi woba agbala neke iwe monemi ojoba
obada wala da ko to po municipal chief imam meshi ke ha libya mi ni ikewo ebote ni di sharia intelligence be wona agugu iwe mo ni ajiji lepo wo oba daleshi gbohun solomon hale eyi boy ne 0244529178 0244529178 kele abote sharia intelligence mdani next week aba ninawo ake lane won pa fai gbena hin lo ogba ni ba ni wo ba cha wo pe no ye community masjid hall eyiteyin agbena won ho ni ba ni ochi ni di wo ochi wo ba ya la gom eke ogba ni ba ni ochi wo ba fi wo mass painting wonye nu ko ni egbeji ADO2 Benjamin Akronsoa ni wole yake ahin voter region ni di Goloweti Afajato South District ye voter region ejimi nye abashe pe ye ni afremi wu ne yo gbene kansa no abasho efi o Ghana National Fire Service ke je headquarters ke agbene voter region bi ve baba la abese afremi wu ko ni abasho efi o keke anye ayatole e papa aje the late Donkin Brasset ebi ni yala baba ne abese wonder nye me fe ashi ke ha me ni ye boa na afremi akwa shika di na ke fi o yi 0243271902 nye ya nye boa bona afremi wo gbeja no da ochi ni ji so a keji atwa agbeje no ne wo meeting ma ke no nye ba nu ake wo hie bie DJ gbangole ni ta consulate ni chire no fa na hawo ni nke bo yo ne Africa na ke gbeje pa she won ba ni na ka na ke hia mi agbene Henry Adipopo Lampo leji money eji wo senior technician wo kele tunu mi Alhaji Ahmed Salim Sowa mi ji money ta ni ni fe mo fe ken ayo chame ma to fele ajo ni fe wa chi ni ke Islam ejele ngamo. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.